The night Daniel Carter chose his mistress over his pregnant wife, rain was pouring like the sky itself had come to witness his cruelty. Amara stood barefoot outside the mansion gates, one hand protecting her swollen belly, the other clutching a torn suitcase his mother had thrown after her. Behind those iron gates, Daniel's arrogant lover laughed in a silk dress Amara once helped pay for, while his mother sneered, "You're nothing but deadweight. My son needs a woman with status, not a homeless burden carrying another mouth to feed." Daniel did not defend her. He simply removed his wedding ring, dropped it into the mud, and said, "Disappear before you embarrass me further." What none of them knew was that Amara had spent her life hiding from a name powerful enough to shake governments. She was not poor, she was not helpless. She was the only daughter of the world's most feared trillionaire dynasty, raised in secrecy until the day her father's enemies vanished. And that day had finally arrived. At exactly midnight, the ground trembled. 10 black helicopters tore through the storm clouds and hovered above the mansion, their searchlights turning night into judgment. Armored vehicles blocked every exit. Men in black suits stepped into the rain and bowed before the woman Daniel had abandoned. Then the lead officer opened a velvet case and said, "Princess Amara, your father has been searching for you. The empire is yours." Daniel's face went pale, his mother collapsed to her knees, his lover stopped smiling. Amara looked at the ring sinking in the mud, then at the family who had thrown her away. She did not cry. She smiled. And when she gave her first order, the entire Carter family learned what happens when you mistake a queen for a beggar. "Secure the gates," Amara said. Her voice was not loud, but every man in black moved as if thunder had spoken. The iron gates that Daniel had used to shut her out groaned open. The same guards who had once refused to look her in the eye now stepped back, trembling, as the convoy rolled into the Carter estate. Daniel stumbled forward, rain dripping from his hair. "Amara, what is this?" She looked at him as if he were a stranger who had borrowed her pain for too long. "This," she said, "is the truth arriving late." The lead officer, a tall man with silver at his temples and a scar near his jaw, removed his coat and placed it carefully around her shoulders. "Your Highness, we have a medical team waiting. The storm is worsening. We should move you immediately." "Not yet, Elias," Amara said. Daniel blinked. "Elias, you know him." Elias Rowan did not even glance at him. His attention remained fixed on Amara, protective and loyal, the way Daniel should have been. Amara turned toward the mansion. Through the lit windows, Celeste Vaughn stood frozen in the foyer. Evelyn Carter, Daniel's mother, was still on her knees near the marble steps, her pearl necklace twisted in her fist. The servants had gathered silently along the walls, their faces pale, their eyes darting between the barefoot woman in the rain and the armed convoy that had transformed the estate into a royal landing field. For 3 years, those servants had watched Amara polish Daniel's image, manage his charity dinners, rewrite his speeches, calm his investors, cover his mistakes, and swallow Evelyn's insults with a grace none of them understood. Tonight, they understood too late. "Everyone who works here," Amara said, "will be paid 3 years severance from my private account. No one loyal to basic decency should suffer because this family is about to lose everything." A soft gasp moved through the staff. Daniel's mouth fell open. "Lose everything? Amara, don't talk like that. You're emotional, you're pregnant. Come inside. We can discuss this." "You had your chance to discuss," she said. "You chose humiliation." Evelyn crawled one step forward, her pride cracking beneath fear. "My dear girl, surely there has been some misunderstanding." Amara's eyes settled on her. "You called me deadweight." Evelyn swallowed. "I was angry. You threw my suitcase into the rain. I thought you had nowhere to go." Amara gave the smallest nod. "That was your mistake." Celeste finally found her voice. She stepped onto the veranda, lifting her chin though her hands trembled. "This is ridiculous. Daniel, are you going to let your wife stage some kind of circus? She's probably hired actors." One of the helicopters lowered slightly, its blades beating the rain into silver mist. On its side was an emblem Daniel had seen only on private banking documents, international news reports, and the doors of companies that controlled ports, hospitals, satellites, mining cities, shipping lanes, defense contracts, and half the luxury hotels in Europe. A black swan inside a circle of gold. The St. Clair Dominion. Daniel had once tried to secure a meeting with one of their junior regional directors and had been rejected without explanation. Now their helicopters were kneeling in his garden. Elias opened the velvet case wider. Inside lay a necklace, a black diamond pendant shaped like a tiny swan. It matched the faded mark on the inside of Amara's wrist, a birthmark Daniel had once kissed when he still pretended to love her. Amara stared at the pendant, and the world around her blurred. For a moment she was not standing before Daniel Carter's mansion. She was 5 years old again, hiding under kitchen table, while Aunt Miriam pressed a finger to her lips. Rain had beaten against a tin roof that night too. There had been men outside shouting in a language Amara barely understood. Aunt Miriam had held the same pendant in her palm and whispered, "When 10 shadows cross the sky, little swan, do not run from them. They are yours." Amara had asked, "Where is my father?" Aunt Miriam's eyes had filled with tears. "Looking," she had said, "always looking." After that night, they moved every few months. New towns, new names, new schools, new warnings. Never trust a rich smile. Never sign your true name. Never ask why black cars sometimes stopped across the street. Never remove the pendant until the day the sky comes for you. But Amara had removed it at 18. Not because she forgot. Because she wanted to become ordinary. She had been tired of being hunted by a past no one would explain. Tired of Aunt Miriam checking locks 3 times. Tired of birthdays spent in silence. Tired of waking to whispers and coded phone calls. So when Aunt Miriam died, leaving only a sealed letter and an old bank card Amara refused to use, Amara buried the pendant in a box beneath the floorboards of a tiny rented room. She chose a new life. She chose Daniel. And Daniel chose to throw her into the rain. "Your Highness," Elias said gently. Amara came back to herself. "Send the medical team to the second vehicle. I will go soon." Daniel stepped closer. "Amara, you never told me." She turned to him. "You never asked who I was. You only asked what I could do for you." "That's not fair." "No," she said, her voice sharpening. "What wasn't fair was me selling my mother's last bracelet to keep your company alive when your investors pulled out. What wasn't fair was me staying up until dawn drafting proposals you took credit for. What wasn't fair was hearing your mother call me useless while I quietly negotiated with creditors who would have destroyed you." Daniel's face twitched. Celeste looked at him. What is she talking about? Amara's smile faded into something colder. He knows. Daniel did know. 2 years earlier, when Carter Global Logistics stood one signature away from bankruptcy, a mysterious private fund had stepped in. Luna Harbor Trust, no board seat, no public announcement, no demand except that the company maintain employee pensions and avoid mass layoffs. Daniel had called it a miracle. Evelyn had called it proof that powerful people recognized Carter blood. Celeste had later boasted that Daniel was destined for greatness. Amara had said nothing. She had sat beside Daniel at the celebration dinner, wearing a plain blue dress Evelyn mocked as cheap, while men toasted Daniel's genius with champagne paid for by the woman he was ashamed to introduce properly. He had never wondered why Amara cried quietly in the car that night. He had never noticed that Luna had been Aunt Miriam's middle name. Elias lifted a tablet and handed it to Amara. "The freeze orders are ready, only your authorization is required." Daniel's breathing changed. "Freeze orders." Amara glanced at the screen. Carter Global Logistics, Carter Holdings, Evelyn Carter Family Trust, Vaughn Carter Development Partnership, personal luxury accounts tied to Daniel Carter and Celeste Vaughn, shell companies, offshore holdings, transfers from Luna Harbor Trust. Every lie had a number beside it. Every betrayal had a paper trail. Amara pressed her thumb to the screen. Daniel lunged forward. Wait. Two guards stepped between them. The tablet chimed. Elias nodded, authorized. Celeste's phone began ringing first. Then Daniel, then Evelyn, then every phone inside the mansion seemed to erupt at once, buzzing like a swarm of trapped insects. The lights in the east wing flickered. A distant alarm sounded from Daniel's private garage where imported cars sat under polished covers. Celeste snatched her phone up. No, this has to be a mistake. My card declined. Daniel stared at his screen as messages flooded in from banks, lawyers, board members, and investors. Account access suspended pending fraud investigation. Emergency board review initiated. Executive authority temporarily revoked. Private jet grounded. Assets secured under St. Clair Dominion claim. He looked at Amara as if seeing her for the first time. Not as a wife. Not as a woman. As a door he had slammed shut without realizing it led to an empire. Amara, he whispered, please. That word hit her harder than the rain. Please. He had not said please when she asked him to stop letting his mother insult her. He had not said please when she begged him to come home from dinners with Celeste. He had not said please when she told him she was pregnant and he stared at the wall as if a child were an inconvenience. But now that his kingdom was shaking, he had manners. She remembered the day she told him about the baby. It had been morning, gentle and golden. She had placed tiny white shoes in a gift box and waited in the breakfast room. Daniel came downstairs late, smelling of expensive cologne she had not bought. His phone kept lighting up with Celeste's name. He opened the box, stared at the shoes and said, "This is bad timing." Amara laughed at first because she thought he was joking. Then she saw his face. Bad timing. Their child was bad timing. That same afternoon, Evelyn told her, men like Daniel need heirs eventually, but not from women who bring nothing to the table. Amara had looked down at her belly, then at the old portrait of Carter ancestors on the wall. She had almost told them then, almost said her real surname, almost mentioned the sealed letter in the bank vault, the pendant she had recovered when she first suspected Daniel's love had become a performance. But Aunt Miriam's warning had lived in her bones. Do not reveal yourself to people who worship wealth. They will not love you, they will only calculate you. Tonight, their calculations had failed. Take Mrs. Carter to the medical vehicle, Elias said. Daniel flinched at the title, Mrs. Carter. Amara looked at him, not for long. As the guards guided her toward the waiting armored car, Evelyn cried out, Amara, don't leave us like this. Amara paused. For one wild second, Evelyn thought mercy had come. But Amara only said, you left me first. Inside the vehicle, warmth wrapped around her. A doctor checked her pulse, her blood pressure, the baby's heartbeat. The sound filled the cabin, steady and brave, and Amara closed her eyes. For the first time that night, her smile broke. Tears slipped down her cheeks silently. Elias sat across from her, pretending not to notice until she whispered, Is my father alive? The scar near his jaw tightened. Yes, Your Highness. Is he angry with me? Elias looked almost wounded by the question. He has crossed continents for the chance to hear your voice. Amara turned toward the tinted window. Beyond it, Daniel stood under the storm, surrounded by the ruins of his confidence. He had once seemed so tall to her, now he looked small. Why didn't he find me sooner? She asked. Elias hesitated. Because the woman who hid you was better than any security network on Earth. Aunt Miriam. A woman with rough hands, tired eyes, and a laugh that could make poor rooms feel rich. She had taught Amara to sew, to read contracts, to listen before speaking, to never mistake volume for power. She had also taught her how to disappear in a crowd and how to recognize a tailing vehicle by the way it ignored traffic lights. As a child, Amara thought every aunt taught those things. Only later did she understand that Miriam had been no ordinary guardian. She had been the chief intelligence officer of the St. Clair Dominion, the woman trusted with the heir when the family's enemies struck. What happened to those enemies? Amara asked. Elias looked toward the helicopters. Your father ended the war 3 weeks ago. The words settled inside the vehicle like a prophecy fulfilled. 3 weeks ago. The same week Amara had started seeing black swans everywhere. One had appeared on a billboard outside Daniel's office. Another on a wax seal stamped onto a blank envelope slipped under her bedroom door. A third on a silver cufflink she found beneath Daniel's desk, though he swore it belonged to a visiting investor. Then, yesterday morning, a black swan had landed on the lake behind Carter Mansion and stared at her through the mist. She had thought pregnancy was making her imagination strange. Now she knew the empire had been circling. Waiting. Watching. The convoy moved before dawn. Amara did not look back as the Carter estate disappeared behind rain and flashing lights. She thought she would feel satisfaction. Instead, she felt hollow, as if revenge were a grand house with no furniture inside. Elias seemed to read her silence. Your father ordered us to intervene sooner if your life was in danger. We were monitoring the estate. Her head snapped toward him. You watched. From a distance. You watched them hurt me. His face tightened. We watched you choose patience when any one of us would have chosen fire. But tonight, when Mrs. Carter ordered the staff to remove you from the property and Mr. Carter cut off your access to all vehicles and accounts, the legal threshold changed. So did the security risk. Amara looked down at her hands. She wanted to be angry. Some part of her was. Yet another part understood Aunt Miriam's last letter, the one Amara had only opened after Daniel began sleeping in the guest wing. Little swan, power that arrives before wisdom destroys the hand that holds it. Learn people first. Learn hunger. Learn work. Learn betrayal if you must. When you finally inherit your name, do not let it inherit your soul. At the time, Amara had folded the letter and wept over it. Now it felt like Aunt Miriam had written it for this very night. The aircraft waiting beyond the city was not a helicopter, but a black private jet with gold-lined steps and the St. Clair emblem glowing near its door. Inside, everything was quiet. Cream leather, warm lamps, fresh flowers, medical equipment discreetly arranged behind polished panels. Amara touched nothing. She sat at the window like a child afraid of breaking a dream. Across the aisle, Elias placed a sealed folder on the table. Your father asked me to give you this before landing. Amara stared at the seal. Black wax, gold swan. Her fingers trembled when she opened it. The first page was not a legal document, it was a photograph. A young woman with Amara's eyes stood on a balcony, laughing into sunlight. Beside her was a tall man with dark hair, holding a baby wrapped in white. On the back, written in strong black ink, were the words, Amara Solène St. Clair, our little dawn. If darkness comes, may she still remember the sun. Amara pressed the photo to her chest. For years she had believed she was unwanted. Aunt Miriam never said that, but silence leaves room for monsters. Whenever Daniel's mother called her rootless, nameless, backgroundless, some hidden part of Amara had feared Evelyn was right. But here was proof. She had been held. She had been named. She had been loved before she had been hidden. The second page was from her father. My daughter, if you are reading this, then the sky has finally brought you home. I will not ask forgiveness in ink. I will ask it on my knees when I see you. I chose survival for you, but survival stole years from us both. Every empire I built was only a lighthouse. Every company, every ship, every tower, every satellite, every crown jewel in the St. Clair Dominion existed for one purpose, to find my daughter and give her a world safer than the one that took her mother from me. Trust Elias, trust no one who suddenly remembers your worth after seeing your name. Come home. Your father, Darius St. Clair. Amara read the letter 3 times. When she finally slept, she dreamed of a mansion she had never seen, built on cliffs above a silver sea. A woman in white hummed a lullaby. A black swan crossed the moon. Daniel stood at a gate with mud on his hands, but when he called her name, she could no longer hear him. By morning, the world knew. Not everything, not the pregnancy, not the humiliation, but enough. International headlines flashed across every screen. Missing St. Clair, heiress found after 25 years. Darius St. Clair confirms daughter alive. St. Clair Dominion initiates emergency succession transfer. Carter Global Logistics under review after heir's identity revealed. Daniel tried calling Amara 117 times before Elias blocked the number. Celeste posted a blurry photo of herself crying, claiming she had been misled by a married man and had nothing but compassion for all women involved. Within minutes, anonymous accounts began posting photos of Celeste wearing Amara's jewelry at parties, entering hotels with Daniel, and mocking poor wives in private messages that were no longer private. Evelyn released no statement. She was too busy calling lawyers, who suddenly charged triple. At noon, Amara landed in St. Adrian, a private coastal city so beautiful it seemed unreal. White stone buildings climbed green cliffs, roads curved around fountains. The sea glittered like a field of crushed diamonds. Everywhere, the black swan emblem appeared, on flags, gates, uniforms, hospital wings, school plaques, research centers, and the shining tower that rose above the harbor like a blade of glass. St. Clair House stood at the highest point. It was not a house, it was a palace disguised as a fortress. As the car approached, Amara saw hundreds of staff lined along the entrance. No one cheered, no one rushed. They bowed in silence, and somehow that silence broke her more than applause would have. At the top of the steps stood a man in a dark suit. Darius St. Clair was older than the photograph, thinner than the news magazines made him appear, but his eyes were unmistakable. They were Amara's eyes, only carrying storms she had not yet lived through. For a moment, neither moved. Then Darius descended the steps slowly. When he reached her, the most powerful man in the world did exactly what he had promised in ink. He dropped to his knees. "My daughter," he said, voice breaking, "I am sorry." Amara stared down at him. All her life she had imagined meeting her father. Sometimes he was a villain who had abandoned her. Sometimes he was a ghost. Sometimes, during the worst nights in the Carter mansion, he was only a question she was too tired to ask. She had never imagined him kneeling. The baby moved inside her, a soft flutter like a hand against a window. Amara placed one hand on her belly and one on her father's shoulder. "Stand up," she whispered. "I don't know how to be your daughter yet." Darius looked up, tears shining in his eyes. "Then we will learn slowly." She nodded. Behind them, the black swan flags snapped in the sea wind. Somewhere far away, Daniel Carter was discovering that love cannot be repossessed once discarded. For the next 2 weeks, Amara lived inside a storm of silk, marble, doctors, lawyers, tutors, security briefings, and memories returning in fragments. She learned that her mother, Seraphine Solène, had been the last daughter of an old royal bloodline that had surrendered political power generations earlier but kept cultural influence across several nations. Princess was not a fairy tale title. It was a courtesy used by those loyal to Seraphine's house, preserved quietly after her passing. She learned that Darius St. Clair was not merely rich, he was a system. His companies fed cities, insured governments, built medical networks, launched satellites, financed ports, protected data, and moved goods across oceans. The world called him a trillionaire. His enemies had called him a king without a crown. She learned that the St. Clair Dominion had never stopped searching for her. They had found false leads in Morocco, Brazil, Finland, Kenya, and Japan. 3 women had pretended to be her. 2 criminal networks had tried to sell information. One former ally had hidden evidence for years. And Aunt Miriam, brilliant, stubborn Miriam, had kept Amara safe by cutting herself off from everyone, including Darius. She feared we had a traitor close to the family, Elias explained one evening as Amara sat in the West Library, surrounded by files she could barely bear to read. She was right. Amara looked up. Who? Elias did not answer immediately. Then Darius entered. Leaning slightly on a cane, he tried to pretend he did not need. Victor Hale, he said. The name chilled the room. Victor Hale had been Darius's closest advisor, godfather in all but name to baby Amara. He had sold information to a coalition that wanted control of St. Clair shipping routes. The attack that forced Amara into hiding had been intended to take the entire bloodline, then fracture the empire. He died 3 weeks ago, Amara asked. Darius sat across from her. No, he was captured 3 weeks ago, alive, talking. That is how we confirmed the final pieces of Miriam's trail. Amara looked at the old letter in her hand. She never trusted anyone after him. She trusted you, Darius said, enough to let you become yourself before becoming St. Clair. Amara almost laughed. Myself, I became Daniel Carter's unwanted wife. No, Darius said softly. You became a woman who could be thrown into the rain and still remember to pay the servants. The words stayed with her. At night she walked the long halls barefoot, unable to sleep. Paintings watched her, ancestors in gold frames, her mother in several portraits, always luminous, always just out of reach. In one painting, Seraphine wore the black diamond pendant and held a white rose. Behind her, almost hidden in the shadows, was a small carved swan with one wing raised. Amara found the same symbol carved into the bedpost of the room prepared for her. The nursery, beside it, had been waiting 25 years. That was what nearly undid her. Not the billions, not the titles, not the helicopters. The nursery. Its walls had been painted with dawn skis and silver birds. A tiny bookshelf held children's stories in several languages. In the wardrobe hung baby clothes preserved in silk. On the rocking chair lay a folded blanket embroidered with her name. Amara Solen. She stood in the doorway, one hand over her mouth. Darius found her there. I came here every birthday, he said behind her. I know that does not repair anything. No, she whispered, but it explains the dustless shelves. He smiled sadly. I had them cleaned every week. Amara stepped inside. Her fingers brushed the blanket. I spent my 7th birthday eating canned peaches in a motel bathroom because Aunt Miriam thought men were watching the diner. Darius closed his eyes. My 12th birthday, I got a second-hand book and a warning not to make friends too quickly. His hand tightened on the cane. My 19th, Daniel bought me a cupcake from a gas station because he had forgotten, then made it sound romantic. Darius opened his eyes. Do you still love him? The question was gentle, but it cut. Amara looked at the painted dawn on the wall. I love who I thought he was, she said. I'm grieving someone who never existed. Darius nodded, as if he understood too well. Then grieve fully, he said, but do not confuse grief with a command to return. While Amara was learning the shape of her inheritance, Daniel was learning the shape of humiliation. Carter Mansion, once the brightest house in the district, became a cage of ringing phones and locked accounts. Board members resigned. Investors demanded explanations. Employees whispered. Reporters camped beyond the gates where Amara had stood barefoot. Daniel tried to walk through the lobby of his company on Monday and discovered his security badge no longer worked. Sir, the receptionist said, pale with discomfort, the emergency board has suspended executive access. I built this company, he snapped. She lowered her eyes. He had not built it, not alone. That truth followed him into every room. In the elevator reflection, he saw Amara carrying coffee to his first pitch meeting because he had been too nervous to speak. He saw her rearranging slides, softening his arrogant phrases, reminding him to thank the warehouse workers by name. He saw her at 23, laughing in his old apartment, barefoot on cracked tile, telling him, "One day you'll have everything, Daniel, just don't lose yourself getting there." He had kissed her then and promised, "I only need you." At the time, he had meant it. That was the worst part. Daniel had not always been cruel. Once, he had been merely hungry. He grew up in the shadow of Evelyn Carter's disappointment. His father died, leaving debts wrapped in old prestige, and Evelyn raised Daniel on stories of what Carters used to be, used to own, used to command, used to deserve. Love in Evelyn's house was measured in achievement. A report card earned warmth. A failed exam earned silence. By the time Daniel met Amara, he believed success was the only way to become safe. Amara made him feel safe before success did. Then success came, and he mistook safety for weakness. Celeste Vaughan entered his life at a charity auction, wearing emeralds and certainty. She laughed at his jokes before he finished them. She knew which ministers mattered, which clubs hid real deals behind fake golf games, which families still cared about bloodlines. Evelyn adored her immediately. "A woman like that elevates a man," Evelyn had said after Celeste's first dinner at the mansion. Daniel had replied, "I'm married." Evelyn looked toward the kitchen, where Amara was helping a maid carry dishes because the staff were overwhelmed. "You are attached. There is a difference." That sentence had poisoned him slowly. At first, he defended Amara in small ways. Then he grew tired. Then he stayed silent. Then silence became agreement. Then agreement became betrayal. Celeste did not make him abandon his wife. She simply showed him the door and praised him for walking through it. Now Celeste sat across from him in the mansion study, furious because her own accounts were under review. "You told me she was nobody," she hissed. Daniel rubbed his temples. "I thought she was." "You thought," Celeste stood. "Do you understand what this has done to my family? My father called me from Geneva screaming about St. Clair auditors." "Auditors, Daniel, do you know what it means when St. Clair sends auditors?" Daniel looked up slowly. "Maybe it means they found something." Celeste froze. For a second, her mask slipped. It was small, a blink too late, a breath too sharp. Daniel saw it. "What did you do?" he asked. She recovered quickly. "Don't be stupid." But Daniel remembered a night 6 months earlier when he found Celeste in his office near the private safe. She had smiled and said she was looking for him. He believed her because believing beautiful lies had become his favorite habit. He remembered her asking about Amara's old jewelry. He remembered Evelyn mentioning that Amara kept pathetic little keepsakes in a locked cedar box. He remembered Celeste saying lightly, "People with no past always hide something." Daniel stood. "Celeste." She backed toward the door. "Fix this." "How?" "Beg her, seduce her, cry, promise her anything. She's pregnant and emotional. Women like that break." Daniel stared at her. For the first time, Celeste sounded exactly like his mother. Something ugly moved through him, but it was not love for Amara. Not yet. It was shame waking up late and finding the house already burned. At St. Clair House, Amara received the first letter from Daniel on thick cream paper, delivered through attorneys because every direct channel was blocked. "My beloved wife, I have made unforgivable mistakes, but I refuse to believe our story ends in anger. We built a life together. Our child deserves both parents. I was confused, pressured, and misled by people around me. Please allow me one conversation, not for money, not for the company, for us." Daniel. Amara read it once. Then she handed it to Elias. "File it." Darius watched from the breakfast table. No reply. "He wants a door. I'm not giving him one until I know what he plans to carry through it." Darius's mouth curved faintly. "Miriam taught you well." Amara touched the rim of her teacup. "Miriam taught me to hear what people don't say." Daniel's letter did not say, "I threw you out." It did not say, "I let my mother humiliate you." It did not say, I called our child bad timing. It did not say, I chose Celeste because I thought she was worth more. So Amara filed it beside the court petition her lawyers prepared for divorce, asset separation, custody protection, and fraud review. Will it be ugly? She asked her chief counsel, Marin Vale. Marin, a sharp-eyed woman with silver glasses, did not soften the truth. Yes, men who lose control often mistake courtrooms for stages, but the evidence is strong. The evidence of what? Marin slid a folder across the desk. Photographs, bank transfers, voice messages, staff statements, security footage from Carter Mansion, medical records showing stress-related complications after repeated domestic instability, copies of emails where Evelyn pressured Daniel to remove the burden before the Vaughn alliance becomes impossible, documents proving that Luna Harbor Trust had saved Carter Global Logistics. Maury documents showing Daniel attempted to restructure shares after beginning his affair, limiting Amara's marital claim. Then came the final page. A photo of Celeste holding Amara's black diamond pendant. Amara stopped breathing. Where did you get this? Private party in Monaco, Marin said. 3 months ago. Miss Vaughn wore it briefly, then removed it after someone recognized the St. Clair design. Amara touched the image. The pendant had been missing from her cedar box since spring. Evelyn had accused the laundress. The poor girl cried for an hour before Amara defended her. Daniel told Amara not to make drama over cheap sentimental junk. Jeeba. The pendant in the photo was worth enough to buy Carter Mansion 10 times over. But that was not why Amara's hand shook. Aunt Miriam had placed that pendant around her neck the night they fled. Her mother had worn it. Her father had preserved its match for 25 years. It was not jewelry, it was proof of life. Celeste had worn it like a trophy. Where is it now? Amara asked. We are tracking it, Marin said. It may have been used as collateral in a private deal. Darius's face changed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. No one trades my wife's pendant, he said quietly. Amara looked at him. For the first time, she saw not the grieving father, but the man governments feared. Darius turned to Elias. Find it. Elias bowed once, already in motion. Amara thought of Celeste laughing in the doorway while rain soaked through her dress. She thought of Evelyn calling her deadweight. She thought of Daniel dropping his ring into the mud. The ring meant nothing now. The pendant meant everything. That night, Amara dreamed of Aunt Miriam again. They were in a train station, one of the many they had passed through when Amara was small. Aunt Miriam wore a brown coat and kept glancing over her shoulder. Little Amara held a paper cup of hot chocolate in both hands. Why do we always leave? She asked. Because staying is easy to find, Miriam said. Will the bad men find us? Not if you remember 3 things. What things? Miriam knelt before her. First, never show your real anger to someone who can use it. Second, when people tell you who they are, believe them the first time. Third, if a person throws you away when they think you are poor, never crawl back when they learn you are rich. Amara woke with tears on her face. Outside her balcony, dawn spilled gold over the sea. The court hearing took place 3 weeks later in a private family division chamber, but privacy could not stop the world from circling. Reporters filled the street. Helicopters that did not belong to St. Clair hovered at a distance. Every social feed speculated whether Amara would destroy Daniel publicly or forgive him dramatically. People loved a fallen man. They loved a betrayed woman only when she suffered beautifully and forgave quickly. Amara had no interest in performing either role. She entered the courthouse in a simple ivory dress with Darius on one side and Elias on the other. Her pregnancy was visible now, impossible for cameras to ignore. The crowd went silent when she stepped out of the car. Not because of diamonds, she wore none. Because peace, when worn by someone wronged, can look more intimidating than rage. Daniel was already inside with Evelyn. He looked thinner. The arrogance had drained from his face, leaving behind exhaustion and panic. Evelyn wore black, as if attending a funeral for her reputation. Celeste was not with them. Coward, Amara thought. Then corrected herself. Strategist. Celeste would never stand in a room where truth had witnesses unless she controlled the lighting. Daniel stood when Amara entered. Their eyes met. For one moment, Amara saw the young man from the cracked apartment, holding a gas station cupcake with a candle stuck in it, singing off-key because he thought making her laugh was worth looking foolish. Then she saw him in the rain, dropping his ring. The memory closed over the softer one. Amara, he said. She walked past him to her seat. The hearing began with formalities. Daniel's attorney argued for reconciliation counseling, shared access to the marital home, and protection against aggressive financial retaliation. He painted Daniel as a flawed husband overwhelmed by pressure, Amara as a suddenly empowered heiress influenced by ruthless advisors, and the asset freezes as excessive. Marin Vale listened without expression. Then she stood. The respondent describes financial retaliation. We describe fraud prevention. Mr. Carter's company survived through funds provided by Luna Harbor Trust, a private vehicle established by Mrs. Carter under her late guardian's instructions. After receiving those funds, Mr. Carter concealed assets, pursued an extramarital relationship, permitted sustained emotional mistreatment of his pregnant wife, and attempted to remove her from the marital property without safe transportation during severe weather. Daniel closed his eyes. Evelyn's lips thinned. Marin continued, "We have witness statements, security records, correspondence, and financial documents. We are not asking this court for drama. We are asking it to prevent further harm." The judge reviewed the documents in silence. Daniel's attorney shifted. Then Marin placed the photograph of Celeste wearing the pendant on the table. Evelyn made a small sound. Amara heard it. Not surprise. Recognition. Marin turned slightly. "Mrs. Evelyn Carter, are you familiar with this item?" Evelyn's attorney whispered urgently, but the judge allowed the question. Evelyn lifted her chin. "It belonged to Amara." "Did you remove it from her cedar box?" "No." "Did you instruct a staff member to remove it?" "No." "Did you give Miss Vaughn access to Mrs. Carter's bedroom on April 17th? Evelyn went still. Daniel looked at his mother. "Mother." Evelyn did not look at him. Marin produced a staff statement. "The housekeeper says you ordered her to unlock the room because Miss Vaughn wanted to see whether Mrs. Carter owned anything suitable for a charity auction." "That is not theft," Evelyn snapped. "I was trying to help the girl present herself better. She had no taste." Marin's voice remained calm. "The pendant disappeared that day." "I didn't take it." "Did Miss Vaughn?" Evelyn's face hardened into the old familiar cruelty. "How would I know what that woman did?" "That woman. Not Celeste, darling. Not the elevated woman. That woman." Daniel turned away as if struck by something invisible. Amara watched him understand, piece by piece, that Celeste had never loved him more purely than Amara had. She had simply loved his ladder. And Evelyn had handed her the first rung. By the end of the hearing, Amara was granted temporary full control over her medical decisions, residence, and personal security. Daniel received no unsupervised access pending further review. The asset freezes remained. Carter Global's emergency board retained independent oversight. The judge ordered Daniel not to contact Amara outside approved legal channels. As they exited, Daniel broke the order before it was even fully typed. He stepped into the corridor and dropped to his knees. The cameras beyond the glass doors caught the movement instantly. "Amara, please," he said, voice cracking. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but don't erase me from my child's life." Elias moved, but Amara raised one hand. Daniel looked up at her, eyes red. "I was wrong, I was weak. I let them poison me. I let money and status turn me into someone I hate, but I loved you, I did. Somewhere under all of this, I did." Amara stood very still. The corridor fell silent. "Daniel," she said, "love that disappears when pride enters the room is not love. It is comfort wearing a mask." He lowered his head. "I won't erase you," she continued. "Your choices will decide what place you earn, not your tears." Evelyn appeared behind him, trembling. For once, her pearls were gone. "Amara," she whispered, "I was cruel because I was afraid." Amara looked at her. Afraid of what? Evelyn's mouth twisted. "Of losing everything my husband left, of watching Daniel become ordinary, of seeing him choose a woman I thought could not protect the Carter name." "The Carter name needed protection from you," Amara said. Evelyn flinched. "I know," she whispered. "And maybe she did. But knowing after destruction is not the same as wisdom before cruelty." Amara walked away. Outside, cameras flashed like lightning, but she did not answer questions. The world wanted a quote, a scream, a collapse, a perfect line that could be cut into clips. She gave them none. "Power," Aunt Miriam once said, "is not always the sword. Sometimes it is refusing to blade for strangers." 2 days later, Celeste ran. She boarded a private flight from Nice under a false booking, carrying 2 suitcases, 3 passports, and the stolen pendant hidden inside a velvet pouch. She almost made it. Almost. At the airport lounge, a woman in a grey suit sat beside her and ordered mint tea. Celeste glanced once, then returned to her phone. The woman said, "The swan does not belong to you." Celeste froze. Across the lounge, 2 airport officers moved toward the exit. A St. Clair security team stood near the windows. Elias Rowan appeared in the reflection of the glass, calm as winter. Celeste's lips parted. "I don't know what you mean." The woman in grey held out her hand. "Then you won't mind opening the blue suitcase." Celeste tried to stand. Elias was already there. No scene followed, no shouting, no dramatic chase. Celeste had always imagined her downfall would be glamorous enough to deserve violins. Instead, it was quiet, efficient, and humiliatingly administrative. The pendant returned to Amara that evening. It arrived in a black velvet box carried by Elias himself. Amara opened it slowly. The diamond swan lay against silk, unharmed, cold, and glittering. She expected rage. Instead, she felt a strange completion, as if a missing bone had returned to her body. Darius watched from the doorway. "Your mother wore it the night we announced your birth." Amara lifted it. "Will you put it on me?" His face softened. He crossed the room and fastened the necklace around her throat. His hands shook slightly. When the pendant settled against her skin, the baby kicked hard. Darius laughed, a broken, beautiful sound. "She approves," Amara said. He asked. Amara touched her belly. "The doctor told me this morning." Darius sat down suddenly, as if the news had stolen his knees. "A granddaughter," he whispered. "For now, just a baby," Amara said gently. "Not an heir, not a headline." Darius nodded quickly. "Of course, forgive me." But Amara smiled. Her middle name will be Miriam. For the first time since Amara had arrived, Darius truly cried. The months that followed tested Amara more than the night of the helicopters. It was one thing to be revealed as powerful. It was another to learn power without becoming addicted to it. Every morning, advisors briefed her on businesses so vast they sounded imaginary, hospitals in 3 continents, grain routes affected by drought, AI defense ethics committees, ocean cleanup patents, labor disputes in shipping ports, a scholarship foundation underfunded in rural districts, a luxury division overcharging artisans, a mining subsidiary with safety complaints buried under polished reports. Amara discovered quickly that an empire is not a crown. It is 1,000 rooms where someone is waiting for your signature and someone else is afraid of it. Some board members expected her to be decorative. They smiled too much, explained too slowly, referred to Darius when answering her questions. She let them underestimate her once. At her first full board session, a senior executive named Roland Vex presented a plan to cut medical benefits for lower-tier logistics workers while increasing executive bonuses for retention. Amara listened silently for 20 minutes. Then she asked how many warehouse workers missed injury compensation last quarter because claims were reclassified as temporary discomfort. Roland blinked. "I don't have that figure." "I do," Amara said. She opened a file. The room shifted. She named the number, then the locations, then the managers who approved it, then the legal risk, then the human cost. Finally, she showed a photograph of a worker named Ben Ali who had lifted cargo for St. Clair Routes for 19 years and now could not afford therapy for his injured shoulder. "My husband thought I was deadweight because I did work no one counted," Amara said. "Do not bring me proposals that survive only by making invisible people suffer." Roland's face reddened. Darius watched from the far end of the table, saying nothing, pride hidden badly behind his hand. The proposal died. The worker benefits expanded. And by evening, the entire Dominion knew Princess Amara was not a rescued ornament. She was a blade wrapped in velvet. Daniel watched these reports from a rented apartment on the edge of the city he once dominated. Carter Mansion had been sold pending settlement. Evelyn moved into a smaller townhouse where no servants rushed to soften her moods. Celeste faced fraud charges and civil claims from families she had deceived. Carter Global Logistics survived, but not as Daniel's throne, under independent oversight. It became cleaner, smaller, and more honest. Daniel was offered a consulting role with no executive authority. His first instinct was insult. His second was hunger. His third, surprisingly, was acceptance. On his first day, he sat in a plain office with a scratched desk and read through employee complaints he had ignored for years. There were hundreds: delayed wages, unsafe schedules, managers using fear as policy, drivers sleeping in vehicles to meet impossible delivery windows. At the bottom of one file was a note in Amara's handwriting from 2 years earlier. "Daniel, this matters. Growth without dignity will rot the company from inside." He had never answered it. He sat there for a long time, holding the paper. Then he began making calls. Not to Amara. To the workers. Apologies, he discovered, are easier when they are vague, harder when spoken to specific people whose pain has names. Some hung up. Some cursed him. Some listened. None owed him absolution. He kept calling anyway. Evelyn changed more slowly. For weeks, she performed regret like a woman trying on morning clothes in a mirror. She wrote Amara letters full of polished sorrow and careful excuses. Amara did not answer. Then, one rainy afternoon, Evelyn visited a shelter for pregnant women because a court-mandated service advisor suggested charitable work might help her image. She arrived in pearls. She left without them. At the shelter, a 19-year-old woman named Rosa asked Evelyn to hold her baby while she filled out housing forms. Evelyn held the child stiffly at first, irritated by the noise, the chipped walls, the absence of proper tea. Then the baby gripped her finger. Something old and buried cracked open. Evelyn thought of Amara standing barefoot in the rain, one hand around her unborn child. Not an inconvenience. Not deadweight. A mother. A frightened young mother with nowhere to go because Evelyn had made cruelty sound like housekeeping. Evelyn returned the next week, then the next. She learned to sort donated clothes. She learned not to comment on cheap shoes. She learned that advice given without kindness is only judgment in costume. Her letters to Amara changed. They became shorter, less elegant, more true. I saw a woman today who reminded me of you. I was ashamed. I do not ask forgiveness. I am trying to become someone who would not repeat what I did. Daniel told me you are naming the baby Miriam. It is beautiful. I hope she inherits your strength and never meets the version of me you knew. Amara read those letters. She still did not answer. Healing, she had learned, is not a door people can pound on from outside. It is a garden. Some seeds grow, some never do, and some must be kept behind fences because their roots remember poison. On the night Amara went into labor, a storm rolled across St. Adrian. Rain hammered the windows of the private hospital wing. Darius paced until Marin threatened to file a legal injunction against his shoes. Elias stood outside the door, terrifying every nurse by trying to look calm. Amara gripped the sheets and thought, absurdly, of the night Daniel threw her out. Another storm. Another threshold. Only this time, she was not alone. Her daughter was born just before dawn. No court announcement, no global headline, no trumpet of empire could compare to the small cry that filled the room. Amara held her baby against her chest and forgot every title she had ever been given. The child had dark hair, furious little fists, and a face that seemed personally offended by the brightness of the world. Darius entered after the doctors allowed it. He approached like a man nearing holy ground. "Would you like to meet her?" Amara asked. He nodded, unable to speak. "Her name is Seraphine Miriam St. Clair Carter," Amara said. Darius looked surprised at the final name. Amara smiled faintly. She should know all of her history, even the parts that must become better. When Daniel was informed, he cried alone in his apartment for nearly an hour. He did not post, did not call, did not send flowers the size of guilt. He sent one letter through counsel. "I am grateful she is safe. I am grateful you are safe. I will follow whatever boundaries you set. Tell her, when she is old enough, that her father's first gift to her was learning not to demand what he has not earned." Amara read it twice. For the first time, she placed one of Daniel's letters in a drawer instead of the legal file. Not forgiveness. Not return. A drawer. Sometimes that is the first honest room regret is allowed to enter. 6 months later, Amara returned to the Carter estate. It no longer belonged to Daniel. St. Clair had purchased it anonymously through a community trust and converted it into a residence for women rebuilding their lives after abandonment, financial abuse, family rejection, or sudden pregnancy without support. The marble foyer where Celeste once laughed now held warm chairs, legal aid offices, a childcare room, and a wall painted with dawn-colored swans. The bedroom Evelyn had ordered open for Celeste became a counseling suite. Daniel's study became a financial literacy classroom. The gates where Amara had stood barefoot were removed completely. In their place stood a wide stone arch engraved with words Aunt Miriam had once written. "No one thrown away by cruelty is without value." Amara arrived for the opening ceremony wearing a pale blue dress, the black diamond pendant, and Seraphine sleeping against her shoulder. Darius stood beside her. Elias held an umbrella, though the sky was clear. Reporters gathered beyond the new garden. Daniel came too. Not as a husband, not as a guest of honor, as a volunteer assigned to parking logistics, wearing a simple badge and directing cars with quiet efficiency. When Amara saw him, he did not approach. He nodded once. She nodded back. That was all. But sometimes all is enough. Evelyn arrived carrying boxes of donated baby blankets. She had aged in a year more than in the previous 10. When she saw Amara, she stopped. Her eyes moved to the baby. "She is beautiful," Evelyn whispered. Amara adjusted Seraphine gently. "She is." Evelyn swallowed. "May I?" "No," Amara said softly. Evelyn lowered her head. "But you may keep showing up," Amara added. Evelyn looked up, tears filling her eyes. It was not forgiveness either. It was a path. The ceremony began at noon. Amara stepped to the podium, cameras lifted, the crowd quieted. She looked at the estate, the garden, the workers, the mothers standing in windows with Barbies on their hips, the staff who once served under fear and now worked under dignity. She looked at Daniel near the gate, at Evelyn near the donation table, at Darius holding himself together with visible effort. Then she looked at her daughter. "A year ago," Amara said, "I stood outside these gates believing the worst night of my life had come to destroy me. I was wrong. It came to reveal what had already been destroyed, so I could stop building a home inside people who did not value me." A murmur moved through the crowd. "I was mistaken for powerless because I was quiet. I was mistaken for worthless because I was not decorated in wealth. I was mistaken for disposable because I loved people who measured value by status." Her voice steadied. "But no woman's worth begins when others discover her family, her money, her beauty, her usefulness, or her ability to benefit them. Worth is not awarded by marriage. It is not removed by rejection. It is not created by helicopters, headlines, or inheritance." Daniel looked down. Evelyn wept silently. Amara continued. "This house once represented pride. Today it becomes shelter. Let every woman who enters know this. Being abandoned is not proof that you are unworthy. Sometimes it is proof that the wrong people have finally lost access to your future." Applause rose slowly, then powerfully. Darius did not clap. He was too busy crying again, and Elias, loyal Elias, pretended not to notice again. After the ceremony, Amara walked alone through the garden. Roses climbed the new archway. The air smelled of salt and rain-washed stone. Daniel approached only when Elias gave a barely visible nod. "Amara," he said. She turned. He looked at Seraphine, asleep in her carriage beneath a white blanket. Longing crossed his face, but he did not step closer. "She has your eyes," he said. "She has her own," Amara replied. He smiled sadly. "Of course." Silence stretched between them. "I'm not going to ask you to come back," Daniel said. "That is wise." "I'm not going to ask you to forgive me either." "That is wiser." He breathed out. "I just wanted to say I finally understand something. When you were with me, I thought you were standing behind me. You were holding up walls I didn't even know were falling." Amara studied him. The old Daniel would have shaped that sentence into a key, hopping it opened something. This Daniel simply set it down and waited for nothing. "Keep understanding," she said. "I will." "For her sake," Amara added. Daniel nodded. "For hers, and because I should have become better before I lost the right to be near you." Amara looked toward the archway. Rain began to fall lightly, though the sun still shone, a strange, golden rain. The kind that made endings look like beginnings. "Daniel," she said. He straightened. "One day when she asks about you, I will tell her the truth, not the cruelest version, not the easiest, the truth." His eyes filled. "Thank you." "The truth will include your failures," she said, "and whatever you do next." He nodded again, more firmly this time. Amara pushed the carriage toward the open gate. No iron bars, no locked entrance, no one telling her she did not belong. Darius waited near the car. "Are you all right?" he asked. Amara looked back once. Daniel stood in the garden, not forgiven, not destroyed, but finally alone with the man he had chosen to become. Evelyn was helping a shelter worker carry blankets. The mansion windows glowed with new life. Somewhere inside, a woman laughed while a baby cried, and someone else said, you're safe here. Amara touched the pendant at her throat. I think, she said, I'm free. Darius kissed his granddaughter's tiny hand, and the Empire. Amara smiled. The Empire can wait until Monday. For once, no one argued. That evening, as the convoy drove away, no helicopters filled the sky, no armored vehicles blocked the road, no dramatic searchlights turned night into judgment. Only one black swan crossed the lake, gliding through the last gold of sunset. Amara watched it until it disappeared into the reeds. She thought of Aunt Miriam, who had hidden her. Her mother, who had named her Dawn. Her father, who had searched. Her daughter, who would never have to earn love by shrinking. And herself, the woman who had once stood barefoot in the rain and believed she had lost everything. She had not lost everything. She had lost the people who needed her small. The next morning, St. Clair House woke to ordinary sounds. The baby fussing, Darius arguing with a bottle warmer, Elias giving security orders in a whisper because the princess is sleeping, and Amara laughing for the first time without pain hiding inside it. On her desk lay 3 documents. The finalized divorce decree. The trust papers for the shelter. The succession charter of the St. Clair Dominion. Amara signed the shelter papers first. Then she lifted Seraphine from her cradle and carried her onto the balcony overlooking the sea. Listen carefully, little Dawn, she whispered. One day people may try to tell you who you are. They may call you too little, too quiet, too poor, too proud, too soft, too strong, too much, or not enough. But you must remember something. The baby yawned. Amara smiled. You were never born to beg for a place in someone else's story. You were born to write your own. Far below, waves struck the cliffs, steady and endless. Behind her, the Empire waited. Before her, the sun rose. And for the first time in her life, Amara did not wonder when the next storm would come. She knew storms would come. But now she also knew what she carried inside her. Not just bloodline. Not just wealth. Not just a name powerful enough to shake governments. She carried memory, mercy, boundaries, fire, the wisdom of women who survived silence, the courage to walk away without becoming cruel, the strength to let people kneel without needing to crush them. And if anyone ever again mistook her kindness for weakness, her silence for stupidity, or her simple dress for poverty, they would learn what Daniel Carter, Evelyn Carter, and Celeste Vaughan had learned beneath the midnight storm. A queen does not become powerful when the crown appears. The crown appears when the queen finally stops hiding. Dear viewers, if this story touched you, remember the subject of the matter. Never measure someone's worth by their clothes, their silence, their background, or what they appear to have. The person you reject today may not need revenge tomorrow. Their growth, peace, and success may become the answer you were never prepared to face. Treat people with dignity before you know their status, love people without calculating their benefit, and never throw away a loyal heart because arrogance makes you blind. If you believe every hidden person deserves respect, share your thoughts, stand against cruelty, and keep watching for more powerful stories about betrayal, strength, justice, and the moment the underestimated finally rise.